It's Electric Drives. Your electric vehicle future starts right now. Welcome to the show. I'm Anthony Algmin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Reese. We created this show to make it easier for others looking to move to electric vehicles, and that's more and more people every day. We're out there using EVs in normal commutes and road trips, and we'll share the wisdom we've gained from living our lives with electric vehicles. You can join in the conversation by sending your questions and topic ideas to questions@electricdrives.us, by joining the Electric Drives Facebook group, and by becoming a patron at patreon.com/electric drives to get exclusive content and help support the show. Bob, how you doing today?
It's been a sort of suspenseful week.
Tell us all about it. Let's hear some adventures of Bob on the road.
Well, last week I had to go to Peoria for some stuff, and I went to the hotel that I stay at all the time that has a Tesla destination charger, and I tried hooking up my Tesla tap, and I wasn't getting anything. And it was weird. It usually when I put the Tesla tap put the Tesla connector into my Tesla tap, you usually have to wait about 20-30 seconds and then plug it into the car, and by then it's done the handshakes and everybody's happy. But for some reason it wasn't working for love or money last week. And I tried it a couple times. I switched chargers, I did the whole 9 yards, and I was really in a panic mode because I had gotten to the hotel with about 5% battery left. Because I was anticipating charging overnight.
Yeah.
So I remembered at the front desk they have an adapter, and I thought, well, before I go running out to go to Electrify America in 20 miles away, I'll see if the adapter at the front worked. And plugged it in, and it worked. So I got it charged that night and the following night. So everything was cool. So the third day, because that was like Wednesday or so, 2 days, I charged for 2 nights using the one that the hotel had, and was able to get full charge, which was good. And then I drove to Ames, Iowa. I had a new customer that was starting up, so I had to go out there and get them all straightened around. Got to the hotel I use out there, and the same identical problem would happen. So I was really in a quandary. I figured out I've had my destination charger enough that I've actually done 132 different charging events with it.
Wow.
So I didn't know if there was a problem with the charger itself.
With the Tesla tap or with the charger, the Tesla tap,
the
right?
Tesla tap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of concerned about the Tesla tap if there was an issue, because in between times I was able to go to a level 2 charger, and then in Quad Cities I charged at a DC fast charger and no problems there. So I was pretty sure it wasn't on the car end of my end.
Yeah.
When you first connect the charger, if it doesn't handshake properly, it comes up on the car screen saying unable to charge. So sometimes it's a matter of unplugging it, going back to no connections at all, then plugging everybody back in together, and then starting it up that time. And since I had an issue that time, I unplugged everything again in Peoria area. And the other thing that sometimes you have to do is reset the car. So you got everything unplugged, nothing's hooked up, start the car up to zero its memory, so to speak, so that it can take the charge. But that didn't work, and so that's why I used the hotel's adapter, and that worked really well. So I was good to go. I'll find out next week if I still have an issue on that end or not, and maybe it's the hotel or something else. So I got to Des Moines area and got to my hotel, which I've used two nights a month for the last year and a half.
Okay.
Um, so I haven't had any issues there. And I had the same identical issue. It just would not get going.
Hmm.
And it finally did get going. Um, but it only charged for about an hour worth of time. And I was just really perplexed. So the next morning, I went to a DC fast charger, which was free. Thank you to PlugShare. Knew
Hmm.
that that one was still operating in a free manner. So I plugged into the DC fast charger and went to breakfast next door and had a full tank when I left it. Oh, actually, it cut me off at 80%.
Okay.
It stopped dead at the 80%. And I don't consider that to be a major issue. I know some chargers look at how much you have on your battery
Mhm.
and cut you off
Yeah.
because they know the curve is such that the charging curve is such that you charge from 0% up to 50 and you're running flat out, and then it tapers off after that. You get to
Mhm.
80 and it really starts to taper off. So getting that last 20% can be many times the same amount of time as getting from 0 to 80%.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
I
when it's
figure
free,
that
you can't argue too much when it's free, right?
exactly. And I figure that it was a shell recharge.
Mm.
And I figured that they probably had it set up to try get turnover so that you'd only charge up to 80%, you'd move on, and then the next car could come in and charge. Um, and I think you get the same deal with some of the Tesla chargers, where they only give you a certain amount of juice um, so that they do get the turnover and they don't have people camping out all day long getting charges. But you can move
Well,
the customers along.
I want to talk about that because that happened to me not too long ago when I went down to Bloomington for a homecoming event, and I went down to the supercharger, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to charge this up so that my car's ready to go home in the morning, and I'd like to charge it to like 90% so that I had a little bit of extra headroom, and I knew I'd be running Sentry mode at the hotel and stuff. So I went into the Myers that
Mm-hmm.
was co-located with the supercharger, and I went in there and I was shopping around, I was having some lunch or whatever because I knew I had some time, but then I got a my phone wiggled and it said your charging is getting cut off because you're at a high volume supercharger
Oh,
location
yep.
and you have 5 minutes to move your car before we start charging you overage fees. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of freaking Meijer. It's going to take me 5 minutes to walk to my car. So I run out there and I get there and I get out there. There's like 10 spots at this place and none of them are taken except for my car. And I'm like,
Yep.
guys, come on, don't do that when I'm in the middle of a store. Like, I get why you want to have that kind of turnover ability, but at least recognize that I mean, like you're eating your lunch. Like you want to eat
Yes.
your lunch and you don't want to get arbitrarily cut off and then have overage fees that you weren't expecting all of a sudden start accruing. Like that's not cool either. And now I know in your case that wasn't going to happen, but your car just
Right.
stopped charging. But like you want to be a good citizen too. You don't want to be plugged in if you're not charging and all that. So it's like it's the thing that it just kind of it all kind of fits together into a theme that I want to talk to you about because this dates me a little bit. So if any of you listening can remember the time before iPhones, so pre like 2008, even before like iPods, we had iPods that were doing the music thing, but we also had all these additional like innovative MP3 players that were doing like these digital rights management
Yep.
things because
Yep.
they were
Yep.
these are the early days of them trying to figure out like music subscriptions and things like that. And so they had all this digital rights stuff. And all that meant is that 2/3 of the time it didn't work right at all. Like it was always so glitchy. It was like those MP3 players, like sometimes your music wouldn't download, sometimes your music wouldn't play, sometimes your music would just disappear for no reason, sometimes nothing worked, and you had to reboot this or reconnect that or reauthorize. There was all this reauthorization that kept having to happen. You had to get to a Wi-Fi signal or plug it into your computer and reauthorize everything every 5 minutes. It was exhausting and stupid and annoying. and eventually it got better. And it just seems to me today, with these electric vehicles and the charging situation and the different plug-in standards and the different all of this stuff, we're at that same point in maturity that we used to be pre-iPhone, and it's just a mess. Even Tesla, as good as Tesla is with their closed walled garden, with their superchargers and everything, they still have challenges with some of this stuff. And especially when it comes to the broader community of electric vehicle users, it's going to be very quickly, we're going to see more cars out there that are non-Tesla than are Teslas. Like, it's not
Mhm.
yet there, especially in the US, but it will come. It's just like Apple. Like, Apple's the one everybody thinks, oh, everybody's got an iPhone. That is not true. Apple does not have the majority of the cell phone market, of the smartphone market. And Tesla will lose that kind of pseudo monopoly that they had the head start in at some point. There's just too many other players. They're not going to be able
Right,
to keep
right.
an over 50% of that, though they have that today. But I do see, like, even though Tesla is pretty good, it's still, we're not where we need to be for this to be mass adoption ready. And I think, especially too, like, your situation here is really interesting with the Tesla Tap, because that thing, if any of you out there have had one, these are bulky, like heavy duty, like serious business types of adapters, things that you would not
Yep.
expect to go bad at all. And like,
Right, right.
but I'm with you. Like, is that where we're landing on this? Is that what you think is going on? Do you think the Tesla Tap has just finally, conked out on you?
No, actually, yeah. I'm glad you brought that point up.
Yeah.
I almost forgot about that. So when I got home this morning, I called the. I know I've talked to the guy before. He's the chief engineer and he's the owner of Tesla Tap,
Hmm.
and talked to him through what was going on with the car and so on.
Mhm.
And he did bring out that in most cases, I was running into um, with the Tesla adapter when it's mounted onto the pedestal. The adapter comes in and it has a little hole in it that seats on the housing so that
Mm.
the the works on the Tesla don't get water in them.
Okay.
But when I thought about it, I realized in both instances, both in Davenport, well, not Davenport, in Peoria and in Ames area, the people hadn't put it up properly. In fact, the
Oh.
one location, the whole, all the piping, all the wiring and so on, and the adapter was on the floor, on the ground.
Huh.
And so there probably had gotten some water into that, and it was giving me a false reading that way. Because he went through, he did the whole, worked out the whole scenario in his mind and said, "Nah, I don't think it's an issue with you. I think there may have been too much moisture for it, and when it connected to the car, it wouldn't do anything for fear of having an issue, like a shorting type of issue."
Huh. Well, and that
Um,
would be possible, because if it was wet out and the rain and that stuff, that could have impacted both of those locations. And so if it was a
Correct.
moisture thing, that logically at least makes sense, because you wouldn't have thought it would have happened twice. But if it's a
Right,
moisture
right.
thing related to weather, sure, it could happen twice. That's really interesting.
And it was interesting because he said, I don't see, I thought there was a problem with my Tesla Tap. I've got a 50 amp version of it. So I've got the
Mhm.
heavy duty version
Yeah.
because I knew I was going to use it quite a bit. And when I told him that, he said, "Nah, it's not a problem with the Tesla Tap." He says, "I can't see that going wrong." He said, "I'm pretty sure it's a problem with the Tesla charger itself.
Hmm.
And probably there was a humidity or rain issue that somehow it was getting shorted out and it wasn't reading right when it connects to the car."
That's interesting. That reminds me, when I had taken my trip, this is when I had the Mach E last year, and I took this trip. I drove around Lake Michigan, and the one hotel that had a Tesla destination charger, where I was trying to use my Tesla Tap myself, it didn't work, but the you remember I sent you pictures of this, the like connector on it, the end of it was all broken and
Yes.
everything, and it
Yep.
was
Yep.
really in kind of poor shape. And so the Tesla Tab, my car, there was like, nope, not doing it. I tried for like half an hour, couldn't get it to work, and then a Tesla came up and plugged right in, and it worked fine, because I think that it was able to just manage whatever those tolerances were a little bit better. But I do find that the Tesla taps and the CCS adapters that are built into the non-Tesla cars, they just seem to be a little bit more precise, or their tolerances of nonsense are lower, because it's not like they're being unreasonable. They're just saying, hey, we're going to err on the side of safety here, and if we feel like anything is amiss, we're not pulling that charge. We are just going to not do it. Seems to be the default on those cars. Has that been your experience in other contexts as well?
Actually, in conversing with this guy, um, I almost have the opposite view. He said
Hmm.
that the Teslas will tolerate a lower voltage and amperage than most other cars will.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter to them as much as it does um, the other cars in existence.
No, that's you're exactly then saying exactly the same thing I was saying, because the Teslas were working with that
Yes.
decrepit charger, but my Mach E wouldn't, and I've just kind of seen that pattern with that. So it makes sense, because if it's a lower voltage and the Teslas can adapt to it or whatever, that's fine. But these other cars want those tolerances
They
are
Yeah, they want the
finer. Yeah,
tolerances better because they want to make sure that everybody's protected along the whole pipeline.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. Well, especially because there's so many now different charging providers. There's so many different home
Yes.
chargers. There's different
Yes.
adapters for these things. One of the things, while we're talking about charging again, it's Tesla just announced that they're now selling their destination charger in the US with the CCS plug
Hmm.
for non-Tesla cars, and obviously the Teslas have an adapter for that to Tesla. So if you're in a home that has a non-Tesla and a Tesla, or two non-Teslas, but you like the app and the experience of being able to manage it, because apparently their home chargers, their destination chargers are kind of the same thing. They are the apps are really good. I don't have one. I have a charge point home charger, but it's you know it is an option out there if you are interested in doing that. You think, oh, you may want to use that app, or what have you, especially too, like the superchargers are going to become more and more available to the non-Tesla vehicles as well. I mean, slowly but surely we're getting some consolidation here, and I think Teslas will probably continue to have their uh standard plug
Proprietary.
and
Yep.
their adapters, and then everybody else will use this other standard. um but that's okay. I mean, I think that can work. I am more worried about the real. I think, I think it's less even about the plugs for the Teslas versus non-Teslas in terms of the different plug standards. It's the fact that those supercharger locations, even if they wanted to make them available to non-Teslas with an adapter, their cables on those are so short, nobody's going to be able to
Yes.
reach
Yep.
them without
Right. Right.
retrofitting them with longer cables. And that seems like a really expensive, really challenging logistics issue for Tesla to solve for if they're serious about making all of their chargers available to non-Teslas. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. I think targeted special stations, news stations that have more stalls and stuff, and they want to make some percentage or all of them available to non-Teslas, all that makes sense to me. But I just don't see them going back to all these parking lots and saying, okay, let's triple the length of every cable. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's a major cost. I
Yeah.
can, and certain cars I can see it not being an issue because I think the Koreans have the the Hyundai and the EV6 both have the charger in the back right
Okay.
brake light, basically. So they're pretty much the same point as a Tesla. It's on the opposite side, but it's still back there.
They could
And
at
I
least
don't remember
back
on
in,
the
yeah.
VW if it's that far back, but I think the Mustang is like around the wheel well, maybe between the wheel well and the door. So it's like the Bolt where they
Yeah.
would need to have a much longer cable.
Yeah, Taycans and e-trons and all of that, they're all between that
Oh yeah.
front wheel and the front doors. The Taycans have it on both sides, but it doesn't matter. Like neither
Yes.
side is going to get close enough.
Right.
And
Right.
in a typical Tesla supercharging station. So, it'll be an interesting evolution there. I think there's ways to solve for that. There may be ways to do extension cables that people can buy. Who knows? Like if your car doesn't work with that, maybe you can buy the extension cable and then plug it in at superchargers. I don't know, that might work. But regardless, yeah, I think it's interesting times as we navigate some of those rough edges. And that's where I love you're on the road all the time doing this stuff, dealing with these things and experiencing far more than what typical people are going to do. Like I'm commuting to and from work every day. I'm plugging into my home. That works great. And once every couple months I go use a public charger for something because I'm on a road trip or I'm doing something that I need a little bit of extra juice. But like you're doing this every week. And so to have that a volume of experiences is really helpful. So I appreciate you sharing that story with us. And we've filled the whole episode, Bob. So I guess we know our original topic is going to get pushed to next week, but it's going to be a nice follow on to this one. So I think, with that, any other thoughts before we go? Like this was a really interesting conversation that was just kind of about real world charging challenges and some things that you're going to encounter out in the real world.
Yeah, and in all the instances, especially the one in Iowa, I had a backup plan, and I
Mm-hmm.
usually do have backup locations where I can get maybe not a DC fast charge, but maybe I can get a level 2 charge to get me enough juice to make it to a DC fast charger.
Yeah.
But usually it's a matter of planning ahead and figuring out, okay, I'm going here. What other ones are you can draw a circle, so to speak, in your mind and go, okay, what other ones are available if that one doesn't work right for some reason?
Yeah, that's great advice. Always have a plan B, even if that plan B is a destination charger or some level 2 charger where you need to go and take a nap for a little bit just so you can make it in the morning to where you need to go or to the next fast charging location. Have that backup plan in mind, because if things do go sideways, and if you do this stuff enough, as Bob, like you've never gotten stranded, but you have had to
No.
use plan B on occasion, right?
Right,
And so
right,
like that's,
right,
I
right.
think, an important lesson for all of us is that, hey, we're still early adopters in all of this in the grand scheme of things. Probably those without Teslas like are a little bit further on that leading edge of pushing being an early adopter. But I think that everyone who drives an electric vehicle should be cognizant of, okay, sometimes there's power outages, there's issues. You got to have a plan B. You got to have you got to give yourself outs, just like a poker, give yourself outs, and you can hopefully have a much more relaxing drive and trip and handle whatever situation comes your way. So Bob, thank you for all this
Right.
wisdom tonight. This has been fantastic. That wraps up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that YouTube bell icon. Please send your questions and topic suggestions to questions@electricdrives.us, and we'd love for you to join us on Facebook and Patreon. All the links are, of course, in the show notes. Thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you a smooth road ahead on your own electric drives.